USGS. Yes, and we're recording the meeting. And so we'll be talking today about the 3D National Topography Model Call for Action, Part 1, the 3D Hydrography Program. And we're fortunate to have Becky Anderson with us to give us a brief overview. Becky, are you able to share your slides?
Yeah, let me just get that going.
I'm going to go ahead and stick a link to the document into the chat. If you've not had a chance to review it, please do. And with that, Becky, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and your role.
All right, sounds good. I'll turn on my camera just for a minute. Then I'm going to turn it back off because it's easier for me to toggle between these two screens at that point. But it's really great to be here. Thanks so much for having me and USGS. And we're really excited to talk with you about the new 3D hydrography program. Today, I'm going to focus mostly on the call for action and give you some background on it because we're really hoping that you guys will be able to provide us some feedback and some information on it. So I'm the National Hydrography Management and Planning Lead with the National Geospatial Program. And with that, I'm going to jump into the presentation. All right, so we've been talking, thinking, discussing the idea of making hydrography 3D with the concept of Hydro long ago. Maybe for about 10 years now, we've been talking about this and working on pilots and that sort of thing. And now it's really becoming a reality. And we're really excited about that. I'm going to start today talking about the bigger picture concepts that we're working on with integrating elevation and hydrography. And then I'm going to move more into the 3D hydrography program itself and give you some background on that. And then afterwards, I think we'll have quite a bit of time for questions if any of you want to ask any. And as Linda said, you already have a copy of the document itself. So where does this all start? Well, it really starts with this concept of 3D nation. So this is kind of our biggest concept of all of our 3D concepts right now. And this is building a modern elevation foundation from the peaks of our mountains to the depths of our waters for stronger, more resilient communities and U.S. economy. This is something USGS and NOAA have been working together on for quite a while, including the 3D Nation study that's been going on. Some of you might have responded to that. And when we look at the concepts for the USGS, we're really talking about the 3-depth topography piece of this, and NOAA is working on more the bathymetry, the ocean bathymetry. So rooted in that concept of the kind of the land piece, the inland piece of this, is the idea of a 3D national topography model. And this is our newest, biggest concept. And you'll note in the name of the call for action, it is the 3D National Topography Model Part 1 3D Hydrography Program. And this is our big new unifying concept for working on both the 3-depth program, the next generation of that, and moving from a set or portfolio of national hydrography data sets, where we're really just focused on the data sets, to a program for 3D hydrography that is much more in alignment with the 3D elevation program. So the 3D National Topography Model, or 3D NTM, is designed to deliver the terrestrial component of the 3D Nation vision by integrating national elevation and hydrography data sets. And we're looking to model the nation's topography in 3D And this is because elevation shapes hydrography and hydrography shapes elevation. So these two pieces, or you could think of them as earth and earth processes, can't really be separated from each other. This is a really important concept when it comes to modeling any data, because if you don't have the elevation and the hydrology snapping together or sitting on top of each other like Legos, you can't do integrated modeling with the two data sets really at all. I want to say efficiently, but really it becomes impossible at some point to do that modeling. 3D NTM is based on extensive requirements and benefits documentation, and this makes sure that we are maximizing the return on investment to a broad range of business uses. The 3D NTM, this concept itself, will provide foundational data to critical initiatives. You can see some of them listed here. So FEMA, Future Flood Risk Data and Risk Rating 2.0, National Water Model, Clean Water Act, National Landslides Preparedness Act. These are just a few examples. 3D NTM will also provide the universal discovery and sharing of water information. And I'll talk a little bit about this more, the 3D HP infrastructure or information infrastructure. It'll provide the underpinning, the geospatial foundation for the Internet of Water. And also with multiple new vintages of data coverage and increased accuracy, the 3D NTM will enable new and emerging applications. There's 4 development tracks that we are looking at for building the 3D NTM. And you're probably familiar with the first track. These are our efforts to complete the national baseline data sets for 3DEP, as well as the NHD Plus high resolution data sets. We've been working for quite a number of years on the second track, which is piloting the integration of hydrography and elevation. And this includes projects to acquire inland bathymetry, as well as to derive hydrography from elevation data. And as far as deriving hydrography from elevation data, we're piloting that in Southeast Texas right now in an area just east of Houston. We have a few other projects coming online soon as well. But also we've been doing a lot of this work in Alaska, and that's not based off of LiDAR data. It's based off of 5-meter IFSAR, but it's been a real proof of concept for us because it's the first place in the country where we are updating the NHD and WBD based off of elevation, and then using those updated elevation aligned data sets, elevation derived data sets to produce the NHD plus high resolution. And so that's been a really exciting project, and that falls specifically under the Alaska Mapping Program. And then these pilots are informing the third development track, which is the major effort to design and implement the next generation of integrated data for 3DEP and for hydrography. And the last track, and this is more future oriented, is to research and develop a 3D data model that will truly integrate elevation and hydrography data along with other layers from the national map. And today we're going to focus in on the plans for the next generation of integrated elevation and hydrography data, this third track. So we're currently working, of course, as you've heard, on program plans for the 3D hydrography program, but we are also starting to think about a call for action, a part 2, that is the next generation of 3DEP. And that'll be focused, at least in part, on topography, LiDAR, inland bathymetry, and other pieces of the next generation of 3DEP that we're still working through, particularly with the 3D Nation study and finishing that study out. The part 2, part 1 is really where we're going to focus in today. And our goal is to receive comments from you guys on this draft call for action, as I mentioned earlier. It's really critical to us to get feedback from the community, to get your thoughts on this, not only what you think about the document, if there are pieces you'd like to see spelled out differently in the document or added to the document, but the program itself, as well as its implementation. So I'm going to highlight a few of the major content ideas in the part 1, call for action now. When I'm done, I'll run all the way through these, and then we can, I can answer any questions you guys might have. So why modernize the NHD? why are we even going here, right? I kind of mentioned earlier the benefit of being able to stack these data sets together, but we've got a lengthy history with the NHD, goes back 20 years, with a lot of investment from a lot of stewards, users, scientists, and we've seen a lot of benefits from that work. So the hydrography requirements and benefits study, which was completed in 2016, we learned from it that the portfolio of national hydrography data sets likely provides current program annual benefits of about $538 million. So those are benefits seen by the users. But HRBS also indicated that if we adopted a modernized 3D enabled hydrography program, and which we accepted and implemented all of the requirements from the study, that this could provide over $1 billion annually in benefits for the users. So we know that there's a lot more that we can do if we shift to a modernized program. A little bit about the current NHD approach. We've been taking a very collaborative data management approach. The NHD portfolio of data sets, as you can see over on the right, the National Hydrography Data Set, Watershed Boundary Data Set, and NHD Plus High Resolution, are the most comprehensive and current data of the nation's surface waters or inland waters. The NHD was originally digitized from USGS 7.5-minute topopods. But now, after quite a bit of work, there are over 9.4 million miles of stream network mapped in the NHD, including about 8 million water bodies, and in the WBD, over 130,000 nested hydrologic units. So this is a huge investment. And we couldn't have done this without leveraging local knowledge from our stewards and our users that participate in helping to manage and update the NHD and WBD. And this includes 41 states and Washington, D.C., who have signed MOUs with the USGS to help manage these data sets. But there's a trade-off for taking a more locally focused approach, and that's that the updates aren't uniform. So in some of these areas, the data hasn't been updated at all. So it's completely untouched, and sometimes this is the data from the topo maps that are 40 years old, or maybe even older. We've seen a national consistency decrease over time. So while we've been able to really emphasize local needs or state needs even, what we're lacking at this point, and this is really key, I think, to where we are from a technological perspective, is the ability to utilize these data sets from a nationally consistent perspective. So with the ability to use, basically supercomputers to calculate flood prediction in the National Water Model, for example, or some of the other more detailed national scale modeling for stream flow, that sort of thing. We need data sets that can meet that national consistency need. But it's important to us that we still enable local contributions to the data set, corrections to the data set, and use of the data set. So we're going to balance that in the 3D hydrography program. At least that's our goal. Also, we've got in the NHD some issues with connectivity that are still around, and we could spend a lot of time trying to address that in the current data sets, and really at the end of the day, recollecting the data from deriving it from elevation solves that need or fixes that problem a lot faster. Also, as I've already mentioned a few times, the elevation data, the 3-depth data, and the hydrography data do not align well. This is a problem for floodplain mapping. I have seen presentations recently out of the Northeast where this misalignment just makes it pretty much impossible to do the type of mapping that needs to be done. So hydrography derived from elevation offers a solution. So we are introducing the 3D hydrography program, and we're really excited to do this, and we are really excited to be talking with NSGIC members about this. So the 3D HP will provide the national consistency needed while meeting local needs, as I was mentioning. And we have a goal to standardize hydrography to align vertically, horizontally, and temporally with 3-depth data. And this will support national and regional issues like flooding and contaminant spills, drought, climate change, others, and will support accurate, updated modeling and analysis capabilities. We saw in the HRBS and the hydrography requirements and benefits study that the need for integration of hydrography and elevation was very high. When we looked at the mission critical applications, it really stood out as one of the key requirements that we could hone in on and make some massive improvements with. But as I mentioned before, it is still really important that we engage with stewards to continue to provide local knowledge on the attributes, as well as flagging issues on geometry, using tools such as our markup application. I can talk more about that another time if you guys are interested. But also that we are working with you guys to figure out how can you map attributes that aren't in the data model against this data set in a way that's meaningful and useful to you as the local or statewide users. And then in the future, change detection based on elevation or hydrography might trigger updates in the 3D HP data. We are still working on how that might go forward, but it's important to think about if we are prioritizing making sure that the data stacks together and works together between elevation and hydrography, we need to find ways to make sure that they stay aligned. So if we see a big change, there's a big flood on the Missouri River, how do we sync up with an update to elevation so that we can get the hydrography updated, that sort of thing. So I'm going to talk a little bit more now just about the hydrography program. So not about the data, I'll talk about the data and the infrastructure in a moment, but in a lot of ways, the 3D hydrography program will follow 3-depth. So we're planning to establish governance similar to 3-depth to develop and coordinate partnerships and acquisition plans, including federal coordination, our work with NSGIC to facilitate state coordination, outreach through the national map liaisons, and we'll have to figure out how stewardship fits into this bigger picture and where it plugs in so that we don't end up with multiple lines of communication that are diverging, but rather all of the pieces are coming together. We are currently working to expand the 3-depth broad agency announcement to include solicitation of partnerships for hydrography data. It's really important to mention that we don't have any funding for this yet, unfortunately. Hopefully, after the call for action comes out, we will end up with funding. But we are preparing now in case we do receive funding to be ready to be able to build partnerships through a BAA or a broad agency announcement type partnership. And if you are new to the concept of a broad agency announcement, those who've worked with 3-depth will be familiar with it, but we could always give a presentation just about the BAA and how it works on the 3-depth side if you guys are interested. Particularly, it's something we could talk about in the working group for this project for the EDH working group. So as with 3DEP, we plan to contract acquisition and processing of 3D HP data through the geospatial products and services contracts, while also allowing for cooperative data acquisition projects where partners contract for the data. We're providing specifications to help ensure consistency across all data acquisition efforts. And those specifications have to be met when data is contracted and is being delivered. It will go through an inspection process, basically to ensure a certain level of quality in the new data set and consistency as well. So when we sat down and looked at the hydrography requirements and benefits study, we really saw 3 potential programs emerging. And one of them is just the status quo. What if we made no changes? What if we just kept doing what we were doing? That includes ongoing updates, which vary by steward, the source data, which varies by steward or possibly isn't being updated. Accuracy of about plus or minus 40 feet, so plus or minus 12 meters. The same data model that's very heavy and it's very complicated, I would say. I try to say complex, but I'll even say complicated right now. But it has the lowest cost. You know, it isn't very costly, but it really leaves major needs unmet. And we know that we are facing growing inconsistency across the nation. The annual benefits for our status quo are about 658 million. And you'll note that's a little bit higher than the number I gave earlier of 538 million in annual benefits. But that's because we, are assuming that going forward, there will be some improvements to the data, or it will continue to improve, even though it's maybe becoming less consistent over time. The next option was to derive the data, to derive the hydrography, the new line work, as well as the hydrologic units from QL2 or better 3DEP LiDAR DEMs, so the standard product that USGS puts out. This will take us about 9 years nationally. We are estimating, at least in the program plan. The source data, as I mentioned, is 1 meter DEMs. These are 3DEP standard product from QL2 or better data. The accuracy is more like plus or minus 2 meters instead of 12. We will be looking at an improved data model. We'll keep what we like and improve where we can to make the data model a little bit lighter, but also to do a better job of supporting modeling in particular, while still supporting our GIS users for cartography and analysis. And the data model is something that we will definitely be working closely with the user community on. This option meets most needs. It doesn't meet every need that we saw in HRBS, but it meets a heck of a lot of them, I'll say. And the major challenge here is that it requires significant increased investment. So it costs a lot more overall, but we see a lot more benefit. So instead of 658 million annual benefits, we see over $1 billion. And this is benefits every year. And I mention that because when we get to the slide on the cost of the program, I think it's important to remember that that's the overall cost to do the recollection for 9 years. But every year we're seeing $1 billion in benefits. The last of them, option 3, or scenario 3, was to derive from QL1 elevation data. So this also would take about 9 years once we had the data available. I'll note even in scenario 2, we don't have 3DEP 1 meter DEMs available across all of the contiguous US and Hawaii and territories yet, but we're getting there, and we're getting there pretty quickly, and we will get there. As far as QL1, the QL1 option, this would be deriving the data from 0.5 meter DEMs that are produced from QL1 or better LiDAR data. Again, 3D data. And this looks like plus or minus 1 meter accuracy. So a little bit more accurate than scenario 2. Again, similarly improved data model. And this meets really nearly all needs, pretty much all needs when we look at this option. But it's the highest cost, and the source data are not widely available. And while there are some places that QL1 data has been collected, I think it'd be some time before we could really get going on this scenario. So, you know, it also has kind of a similar annual benefit, but not that much higher really than the second scenario. So we have chosen the second scenario. So now I'm going to walk you through what this looks like from a more of the data perspective and exactly what we're talking about building. So building the 3D HP data. So we're going to improve accuracy and connectivity with a stack of interoperable hydrography data that are aligned by virtue of being derived from a common elevation source. And you can see that right now we have about 26 million, these are actually flow line features in the NHD. So earlier I gave you a number for stream miles. This is the actual number of features in the data set. We estimate that if we derive the data from 1 meter DEMs, that we will receive about 200 to 300 million flow line features. That's a lot of features. And this is in great part because when you map from the elevation data, when you derive the streamlines from the elevation data, you can really catch all of the channels, at least all the channels you can see in that DEM. You have a much higher rate of collection, and that really densifies your data. And that's something I'll mention in a bit as well, this data densification, because that can be an issue in itself. So the stream network, including water bodies. So when I say stream network, I mean the water bodies as well, even if they're not on the stream network itself, as I mentioned, would be derived from 3D 1 meter QL2 or better LiDAR DEMs with Z values. So with an elevation value on each vertex that has monotonicity or a downward trend enforced. This stream network, as I just mentioned, would be quite a bit more dense. One of the things that we have in the NHD right now, if you're not aware, is the visibility filter attribute. I'm sorry, could someone mute? I can hear some movement in the back. We have the visibility attribute, which is really important because it allows you to filter out or generalize the data set. This is something that we think is going to be really important with the stream network going forward, because we will, even if we have specifications to get a consistency, we still may see some areas where the data gets mapped a little bit more finely or densely than other areas, even if the streams are kind of overall similar, right? And that might just be a choice, but we want to be able to generalize then that data set and use it for different applications that might not need that density. So that's something that's a really important concept, I think, in 3D HP. Also hydrologic units, including catchments being the drainage area around each stream segment, will be a part of these data sets. And those will also be elevation defined. We'll have a set of raster surfaces. This is some of these raster surfaces, kind of similar ones come with the NHD plus HR product, But one of the big improvements, I think, is supplying or providing a hydro condition digital elevation model. So this would be the digital elevation model altered to ensure that if you use the stream network and the elevation model together, that water is flowing to the stream network the way that you would expect it to on the landscape. Also attributes, we are going to preserve some of the attributes of the NHD and WBD and NHD plus HR. There's a lot of good information in there. We're going to figure out what we want to keep that we've built up for 20 years. But we'll also have additional attributes that make the data usable for engineering and modeling applications. And some of that's already available in the current NHD plus HR product. And again, all of this will be reviewing and looking at the data model to see where we can make improvements. Some other data enhancements that you'll see in the call for action include adding connections to groundwater models. We haven't quite figured out how we're going to do this, but we would like to really increase the ability or connection to a more complete hydrologic cycle. And we think part of this is being able to connect to groundwater models, along with aligning better with the National Wetlands Inventory. We haven't done a fantastic job in the past. We've kind of been, in two separate silos, mapping the NHD and the NWI. And we've been working really closely with the Fish and Wildlife Service recently to understand how we can improve our mapping across these two data sets. So we'll be looking at that with 3D HP and NWI going forward. Also, we'd like to include engineered hydrologic systems in a more meaningful way. So in particular, stormwater systems, especially in mid-sized to larger cities. But there's a big caveat on this one. I don't believe we can read in an entire stormwater system everywhere for every municipality without this data set just becoming too dense. Also, it's a lot of work to do that. We need to do research into this, but what I think we're looking for here is the Goldilocks level of storm system mapping. So what's enough and what's too much? The idea, what we really want to do is know where the water goes in the ground and where the water comes out of the ground and convey the water through that area. So how many, what size lines, how do we accomplish that as far as the system, the stormwater system goes? We'll have to figure that out. But just so you guys know, I am not expecting that we're just going to go to cities and ask them for their stormwater system and read it in. I just don't think it's going to work that way. But we'll see through research. Also, we'd like to have greater compatibility with other data sets like superficial geology, soils, land cover, transportation networks, and other infrastructure. And I would say a big one in here is culverts. Culverts is something that we need to figure out how we're going to handle. How are we going to handle it in a new data model? What's the best way to map it? And what are the real users' needs for it? Because when it comes to elevation-derived hydrography, culverts are really important. A little bit about building the 3D HP infrastructure. You may or may not have heard of the National Hydrography Infrastructure. This is basically the same concept of it, but we're renaming it as the 3D HP infrastructure so that it has the same branding and naming as the other components of the program. And an infrastructure, if that's a new term to you, it was a new term to me when I bumped into it, is an information infrastructure. So it is the parts and pieces, the technical parts and pieces of a technical infrastructure for data and information. So while there's an abundance of water-related data out there, we don't have a way to systematically organize, search, and discover it in this country. We've got, for example, temperature data. We've got stream gauge information. We have all kinds of information that you might want to know about water that's more relevant to discover if you look at it in the context of the stream network, because we all know a stream can loop around, and 2 points on a stream network can look like they're a mile apart when really they're 5 miles apart if you follow the stream, right? So it's really important to do all of this to map and look at water-related data within the context of the actual stream network. So the USGS and the National Hydrography Infrastructure Working Group have been working on the NHI to provide a geospatial infrastructure for federated sharing and discovering of water information that's within the stream network. And that includes tools to reference data to the hydrographic framework. So in the past, this has been the NHD plus HR that we've been talking about, and it will become the 3D HP data. So use those tools to take your, let's say, water quality point and place it on the stream network where you actually took the measurement. Publish that data out as a community member. We don't want to hold that data at USGS. We want the agency who collected the data to produce or publish a map service, for example, of the data. But then we can provide a cataloging service and search and discovery tools and functionality to help people find that data that's been published, so that everybody can contribute their information and find it without one user or group having to own it. And that's that federated idea. And this is a part of a larger concept called the Internet of Water. That is, right now there's a project out of Duke University that's been working very hard to figure out how to do a lot of this to expose water related data. And we've been working with them on how we can help to provide that geospatial underpinning for the Internet of Water, along with some of these tools for catalog search and discovery. So what are the costs for this program? Well, about $676 million over 9 years. So this is why I mentioned every year we're looking at $1 billion in benefits, because that's a big number, but I think we recoup on that pretty quickly. So there's an assumption of moderate growth initially in the program and then accelerated growth in subsequent years. And investments in 3D data have made it possible to derive 3D HP features for a significant portion of the nation, as I was mentioning earlier. Like 3D, 3D HP depends on significant investments by partner organizations. So the cost share model is one potential model, and it's not intended to allocate cost shares to any organization or individual government sectors. The actual funding model is expected to evolve and change in the program operations plan. So right now, we're not looking at any cost sharing here. We are just looking at the different parts and pieces of, this big block here in the middle is really deriving that new stream network, which takes up most of the funding, basically. Most of the costs are found there. But we're excited to partner with states, with federal partners, with anybody else who wants to partner to move this forward. Just a few of the implementation milestones. I'm not going to walk through all of these, but I did just want to point out that we have been doing a lot of work already, starting even back as far as FY15 with the NHD plus HR. But you really see this heat up around FY22. So we're going to become very busy here next year and then going forward. And this is important because it's going to have, it has implications for how we move forward with the NHD plus HR, which we would like to get through. We already have the beta done, the beta version, a first version done for the contiguous US. We would like to get through one complete update of the contiguous US and all the way through Alaska, as well as an update for Hawaii and the territories. Before we retire that information, so it'll always be available, but we really need to pivot then and start moving toward 3D hydrography programs so that we can make these major improvements. Some of the big categories of work that we'll be doing are governance and communications. We talked a little bit earlier about just, having governance that's similar to 3DEP, doing more pilots. We've already started doing some pilots with the NWI and aligning better to at least the NHD for now. And we're learning a lot by doing that work, particularly in Alaska is where that's starting. Data acquisition, we have already created a specification for the hydrography from elevation, and that will undoubtedly be an ongoing thing where we keep updating it, but we need to do more specifications as well, and some more work with the BAA, assuming that we get funding. We will be starting work this year, this coming fiscal year in 22 on the modernized data model, and we've got a pretty aggressive timeline for that, but I really think we need to move out on that very quickly and get it going, because it is the basis for all other work that we do. All the other development processes and systems will rely on that core of what the data set's actually going to look like. And we'll be working on that infrastructure internally within the USGS. Right now, we're looking at a roadmap for that will become a part of the call for action, probably in the next draft version. And it's just really important to highlight, I think, the multiple roles in 3D HP. This is not something that USGS can do on our own. This is something that is really important to have strong partnerships with other federal agencies, with state and local partners, with all of you, with the private sector, and also with users. This is just kind of a high level chart, and you'll see it in the call for action. But the big picture here is just that we all have important roles to play, and you guys are very key to making this happen. So what are our next steps? Well, we plan to release the published 3D NTM Call for Action Part 1 3D HP document in late 2021 or early 2022. USGS has a very rigorous publishing process because we're a science agency. And so it takes a while sometimes for things to get through our science publishing network. So that could delay it a little, but I'm hoping to get it out the door as soon as possible so we can get moving on these things. The document right now is available to all of you for comment. It's already been sent out to you from NSGIC, and we'll follow up this call with a link to the NSGIC comment sheet. NSGIC has very graciously offered to collate comments from members, and it's very much appreciated from my side, because I think we'll be getting a lot of comments from a lot of groups. And lastly, we're just really excited to hear from you about this program, the call for action, and to work with you on the exciting new program. So that is it for me.
Becky, thank you very much. This is really exciting, and this is big. Let's go back to, we did have a couple of questions, and I encourage folks, please enter your questions into the comment. Phil, you wanted to ask about the plans for to identify gypsy contractors?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So what plans or processes or requirements are USGS going to put in place to identify trained and qualified gypsy contractors or other contractors for that matter that capable of performing this work?
Hey, Phil, thanks for the question. You were kind of fading out, but I can see it in the chat. So I think I heard it all. We've already been working with the Gypsy 3 contractors in Alaska. And there were a set of pilots that I think they've now finally been completed. The data hasn't been fully conflated, but that's an issue on our side with checking in and out data that we're having right now. But I think that we've pretty much completed those pilots, and there were, I think, I think there was 4 contractors on that, 4 gypsy contractors. And they learned a lot, I would say, and we learned a lot. And what happens is the data's contracted out, it comes into the USGS, and we have automated inspection processes, and we have manual inspection processes that are more rigorous. So you've got to get through the automated ones to make it to the manual ones. Those inspection processes are based on our specifications. So if you're reading and meeting the specifications, you should be meeting the inspection and making it through. And that's basically our requirement, is that you can meet the specification. That's the most important thing for us, because that's what gives us the consistency and the quality of the data. So we're at this point basically meeting it through practice as far as, you know, everybody kind of learning and getting better at it through that iterative process.
Becky, if I can elaborate, how would a state or other partner know which contractors had this experience and qualification?
So I don't want to rattle them off right now because I'm afraid I'll miss somebody or get them wrong, but I can give that information to you. If you go right now to the GIPSY, so the Geospatial Products and Services contract webpage, I could try to drop it in here in a second.
So you're just saying, just working with those folks that you participated with.
Yep, exactly. Those are the contractors, but I could get you the list of the ones that have been working in Alaska. But also on that webpage is a list of the gypsy contractors. And so for people who aren't familiar with it, we've got a contract vehicle at USGS that's, I'm not sure if I'm using the right word here, but basically pre-competed kind of. We've got a list of contractors that we can work with without sending out like a broad RFP to everybody. But there's a set list of contractors, and those are the ones that we've been, not all of them on that list, but some of the ones on that list are the ones we've been working with in Alaska on this.
Phil, do you want to others can answer questions? We won't ask all of Phil's questions if other people put them in, but as long as he's asking, we appreciate it. So go ahead, but you can follow up on your other questions.
Well, part of maybe a follow up on this trained or qualified contractor thing. Part of doing maintenance on NHD is, you know, our stewards at the Indiana Department of Natural Resources had to go through quite a bit of extensive training provided by USGS to interact with the tools and with the NHD. It's not, you know, it's not super straightforward, and I'm just trying to get an understanding of you know, how that's going to, you know, are these contractors going to go through that same training, going to be certified USGS conflation experts, or, you know, or what do you guys envision there?
Well, we always have training available, or, you know, assistance, especially when it comes to conflation. So for people who aren't familiar, that is taking new line work and matching it to old line work to move the attributes from the old line work to the new line work. And it's a part of the process to bring the data into the current NHD. So, you know, we've got people on staff who have expertise in that, and we're actually looking at a new system, a new, more off-the-shelf system that we think can handle the load or the density of this data a little better than our current system, our current conflation tools can. But no, we aren't providing the kinds of, for example, NHD update tool training, because we won't be using that tool. That tool is not a part of the process here. So instead of using that tool, which kind of in some ways acted as an inspector, right, because it's got checks in it,
right,
we will be building more internal checks within the 3D HP enterprise database. We don't have much of that built into the database itself right now. So we'll be looking at where we can build more internal rules to make sure we're not breaking anything. For example, between the hydrologic units and the stream network, we don't have rules between those right now, between the WBD and the NHD and the database itself, the enterprise. So where can we do that? But instead of having a tool where we're forcing all of the rules through that tool, the data goes through, it's built and it goes through inspection and then it goes through conflation. So it's less of here's training to know how to do this and more here's the specifications. We're available for questions on those. There's inspection and that enforces the specification. So it's just a different paradigm almost, if that makes sense.
Sure, gotcha. Thank you. So following up on that, does that $676 million estimate include that conflation
Yes.
of the EDH? It does.
Yes.
Whoa.
It does. Yep.
Okay.
And
Well,
again, we're looking at a new off-the-shelf software for that that I am hoping brings the difficulty or the level of expertise needed down a bit for conflation, because I really think it's important that we lower the bar on that.
Yeah, agreed. I have another question. It's in the
I'm
chat.
going to
But
jump in here, Phil. I'm going to ask one.
all right, go.
So in the document, you talk about a tiered approach to data edits, where stakeholders will submit their edits to the USGS markup. And I know this is all just theory and process right now. And that the review of the edits would be conducted by, you have 3D HP stewards, or USGS where no stewards are established. I couldn't find any reference in the document as to who are the 3D HP stewards. Are these your NHD and WD stewards, or?
Yeah, we haven't fully defined that yet. That's a really good question, Linda. And that'd be great for you to tag that if you could. In the comments. I would love that. So I don't forget about that question. But the way that I'm envisioning it now is that we'll work with our current NHD and WBD stewards. Now we won't have those two kind of separate data sets in the same way. So we'll kind of have to figure out, you know, what the needs are, I guess, going forward for stewards and stewardship. But I do foresee a strong role still for the states, but also for federal entities. I think we need to make sure that we aren't creating conflicts between state lands and federal lands and who is approving markups on which, or, you know, that sort of thing. But I foresee it as being still, you know, we've got this strong group of state stewards that I sure hope that they are still involved along with federal stewards.
So let me just clarify, when you say, so you see that as being primarily a state role or a combination of state and federal role?
I think it's a combination depending on basically where the water is. But we've had, at least in my understanding, really good relationships between the states and the federal agencies to be able to work together to figure out who's going to respond to a markup and approve it and that sort of thing. So we'll have to figure out a process for that depending on if, say, an error is found in a data set. We don't want to make a lot of changes to these data, right? Because they're being inspected. We're spending a lot of time making sure they're good up front. But let's say there's an error that someone finds. Well, is the error on the U.S. Forest Service lands, or is it somewhere else in a state? We'll need to figure out a workflow and a process for who reviews those, and make sure everybody's aware of who's doing what.
Got it. All right, Phil, sorry.
No, this kind of ties right into it, because I see that as being a resource constraint in this workflow, a very small funnel at the end of a very large opening of potential data coming in. And if, you know, so the question I had, would USGS consider using contractors to perform both the manual and automated inspection to streamline this process?
We've discussed it a bit. You know, it's always something that we could think about. I think right now the development of the inspection processes are so new and we're still working through them that we haven't gotten too far down that conversation yet. Oh, Linda, were you going to say that Josh Greenberg question? Okay, good. Hey, Josh.
I was going to say that there is a section of the document, Josh, that's specifically dedicated to state roles and responsibilities. It's not real specific at this point, but Becky, I was hoping maybe you could just sort of hit some of the highlights on that.
Sure, yeah, and I don't have it open right in front of me, but I'll just kind of give you an overall.
You can just give your general view of what the state role.
Yeah.
Well, and to be clear, my question is specifically in the next couple of years, because it sounds like before things really gear up, what in the short term, immediate terms, what kind of things can states be doing? Not the long term for the project.
Gotcha. So not the long term, like obviously we would love to be partnering with you, right? That's going to be really important.
Right, but between everything up and running, to that point, what kind of things should states be thinking about?
There's a couple of things that I think are really important. One of them is that stewards and GIOs in states are communicating. That hasn't always been happening. And I want to make sure that, like I was saying before, we don't end up on these diverging paths of communications where our partner support group is talking with the stewards and I'm talking and NSGIC is talking with GIOs, and they just kind of keep getting further apart. And I know you guys are doing a great job in Washington of bringing that together. Also, getting all of the states involved and up to speed is just important. And the number one way we can do that is to get the states involved in this project. And it was being called the the EDH for 3D NHD project, which we will probably rebrand soon, the 3D HP project, 3D HP for the nation. That project's working group, being involved in that is really important because that is where we can go to talk about things like, hey, what do you guys think about the way that we're outlining stewardship going forward? What do you guys think about this data model? What are your needs with data going forward? It really gives us a sounding board at USGS to have the states in that working group. So I would say joining this project overall, but especially the working group, is going to be really important so that we can work with you guys to figure out the implementation of this program and some of the details to make sure that your voices are being heard and how you'll be involved going forward. So it's the program building piece right now that I think is really critical for the states to be involved with. And the process for that, I think, is this NSGIC project is a great place to focus those energies.
John, go ahead, Derry.
I had to figure out how to unmute. So we've never, I'm with the state of North Carolina, we've never had a stewardship agreement. Would this hurt us in this effort?
No, please be involved. We can figure out the stewardship agreement stuff later, right? California hasn't had one and they've been working really closely with us for a long time also, I'd say at some point here real soon that's something we can talk through is what do we want stewardship agreements to look like in the future? Do we need them? How should they be? But absolutely not. We are really interested in working and talking with you guys, especially, going forward with just understanding your requirements and your needs. I will take all inputs from all states for that.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Becky? This is a real opportunity. Well, okay. Again, I want to thank you, Becky. I know you've been working hard and long on this. And frankly, it helps me understand our project a lot more. So thank you. So y'all, please go look at the document. You'll see that NSGIC and state contributions are referenced throughout the document as key partners. And as I said, there's an explicit description of state roles and responsibilities. There's a description of state roles and responsibilities. And given that we've got this recognized role, I really encourage you all to read the document and respond with comments and questions. And to clarify, when you read the document, you will see a direct link to a USGS comment sheet. And you are certainly free to enter any comments you want to. But we're going to encourage you to contribute your comments through a NSGIC version of the document. We'll send that out in response to the same email message. But the idea there is that if we collect our comments, we're going to see those common issues, and we're going to be able to report back to USGS a more consolidated response that says, hey, this is important among multiples of states. And it'll help them, dig through their comments as well. So, and turnaround's going to be fast. They want comments by August 20th. So we'll follow up this presentation with the link, encourage you to review the document and submit your comments. We may reach out to some of you for specific clarification. And if anybody in particular has strong interest in helping to adjudicate those comments, please contact me or Phil directly, and we'd love to include you in the process. Becky, any other comments to the group?
No, just thanks so much. Really appreciate any and all comments you guys can give us. Again, on the document or content, kind of if you have questions, just, something seems missing or, real specific to the program. And if anybody would like to follow up with me, has more questions or wants to talk one-on-one, I'm definitely available. You can find me on the USGS website, and I'll put my email in the chat here real quick.
All right, thank you. Very helpful. Any other comments or questions?
Is it clear when this group will be meeting again? Is there a timeline or a goal?
Well, Josh, this was open to the entire NSGIC community. So when you say you mean comment specific or?
Well, I meant this work. This is kind of a work group, wasn't it?
No, this was advertised to the full NSGIC community.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
No, that's fine. Trust me, any meeting we have, your name's going to be on it. So.
Linda, is there a working group meeting set up, since we kind of co-opted, we started out with this, like, as you were saying, Josh, as a working group meeting, and then changed it to be more broad. But I don't think we have one set up now that we switched that one. Is that correct?
We don't, and that's a great point to you both, you and Josh. We can try and schedule something, and we could use that working group to adjudicate the comments. So that's a great idea.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic to me.
That'll be a short, good luck finding a meeting date, huh?
Yeah, right. Yeah, also it's useful to me, even if we meet after the comments are due, just to talk through them. Even, sometime in early September, that works for me. I'm more than happy to do that.
All right, and just a reminder to everybody, BAA webinar is August 11th. Is that correct, Sue?
Yes, it's my turn to not be able to find the mute button. Yes, August 11th, 1 Eastern. And let's drop in the.
Oh, you're going to put a link? I was going to put the.
Yeah, if you've got the link handy, that would be great.
I don't have the link handy. Let me check.
I'm getting to it. Let me see. There it is. So registration for the webinar can be found at the link I just dropped into the chat, and we'd be happy to see any of you for instructions or information about how to apply to the FY22 3-depth broad agency announcement.
All right, thank you USGS for all the work you're doing, for making us part of the process, and thank you state members for being so active in the development and consolidation of this data. This is a cooperative agreement, so seems to be working that way. Thank you all for joining us today.
Great, thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks, Becky.